YouTube, this is the Bucket coming at you today with my Smith & Wesson British Service Revolver or Victory Revolver. This model of revolver has got a lot of different names. It was called the hand ejector, the 1905, the military and police, the M&P. This particular one was made for the British, so that's hence the name, the British Service Revolver, because the Smith & Wesson has been making these literally since 1905. It's considered one of the best-selling revolvers of all time. The overall dimensions of this particular one is 9.75 inches. It weighs in at 26 ounces. The barrel's 5 inches. The double action trigger pull on this is going to be right around 12 pounds. The single action is right around 5 pounds. This is going to be what everybody's going to refer to as a Parkerized finish, although technically it is not exactly a Parkerized finish. For the purpose of this particular video, we can call it a Parkerized finish. So before the U.S. got into World War II, it was clear that the British needed help, and we started a program called Lend-Lease, where we would send military aid to the British Commonwealth and their nations in the form of aid. And we sent famously destroyers, and we sent guns. And one of the things that they asked for were revolvers. And Smith & Wesson said, we can send you some. And they asked for them to be in 38-200, which is dimensionally the same as a 38 Smith & Wesson round. Actually, they went off of that round when they were making their choice for the new revolver cartridge. And so pretty much Smith & Wesson sent everything they had that was chambered in 38 Smith & Wesson to them. So the early Lend-Lease ones were any barrel length. They had checkered grips. They were blued, just pretty much anything that they could get. And Smith & Wesson then said, well, what would you like to see? And this is the setup that they wanted moving forward. So when you see a British Victory revolver, the vast majority of them are going to have this plain walnut grip. The markings on it are going to say Smith & Wesson on this side of the barrel. It will say 38 Smith & Wesson CT, let me double check, CTG. And then it will say made in the US, and then it will say Smith & Wesson, have the logo right there. Mine happens to be re-imported, so after the end of the war, they didn't need all of these, and so a lot of them were bought up and re-imported to be sold as a surplus revolver. So yours may or may not have those markings as well. Also, right up here, there will be a flaming bomb logo, and then it'll say U.S. property, and then it will say GHD, and GHD stands for Guy H. Dewey, who was the inspector in charge of those particular revolvers. The serial numbers will be on the butt, and you'll have the serial number right here. Sometimes it'll have a V in front of it. Sometimes the V will be on the other side of the lanyard. And midway, well, closer to the end of the war, a serviceman dropped his revolver, hit the back of the hammer. The gun went off and killed him. And so they ended up changing up the hammer block safety. And after those, they would mark those revolvers with a VS and then the serial number. So all of those are completely normal. Places you'll want to check is on the cylinder. There will be a serial number there as well. You'll also have it on the crane right here. And on the inside of the ejector, there will be the serial number there as well. Probably impossible to get it up on my camera. Sorry about that. So those are going to be the markings that you're going to look for. Now, you'll see a lot of them will have different unit numbers. Mine didn't have any unit numbers, which is not completely crazy, dependent on when they got them, dependent on what it was for. Some of them will have them, some of them won't. If they were accepted for British military use, they will often have broad arrows marked on them. And then the broad arrow means they were accepted by the British military, and then the opposite side of the broad arrow would be sold back after military use. So if you see those are all common. They can kind of vary where those are at. I would have liked for mine to have those. Unfortunately, this is what I could get. So When you will look at those are all for the British service revolvers. The name Victory Revolver is commonly used for the U.S. ones as well. They will be chambered in 38 special, and they will almost always have a 4-inch barrel. There are some 2-inch barrel ones. Those are very, very uncommon. So if it's a 4-inch, that's probably one that was made for U.S. service. Although they did use some of the 38 200s in U.S. service as well. But if you see it with the 38 200, it's probably a British. All in all, they made about 850,000 of these revolvers in 38 Special and 38 Smith & Wesson. About 590,000 of them were made in 38 Smith & Wesson, so they're obviously more common. They were just good, solid revolvers. Actually, so much so that at the end of the war, when they went to the more common, the more new model system, the 38 Special version was the Model 10, and they actually made the Model 11, which was the 38 Smith & Wesson model. So, if you're thinking about purchasing one of these, one of the things about the British revolvers is when they got brought back into the country, they didn't sell as well because 38 Smith & Wesson is not as common of a cartridge here in the US, and 38 Smith & Wesson is a more powerful cartridge. So what some companies did is they would bore out the cylinders, because actually I have an example. Put it down here for a minute. This is a 38 Special, and this is a 38 Smith & Wesson. So you can see why people would want a 38 Special version. The 38 Smith & Wesson will obviously fit in there just the way that you would want it to. And a 38 Special will not. So you can see here on the camera, they won't fit in there because they're not two-way interchangeable. So what some of the importers would do would actually be bore out these cylinders, so a 38 Special will fit into the gun. It's safe to do that. It just kind of hurts the collector value if you go ahead and you bore those out. So if you're really buying this for a piece of military history and you don't want it to have been bored out, do go ahead and check that, because that is not uncommon for them to do. The 38 Smith & Wesson round that we have here in the United States and that you can buy, which is what I did. I think I spent $38 to get a box shipped to my house, which is about the same as 38 Special at this point. So it's not financially impossible to shoot these guns. They're almost like cowboy loads. They're really light. They're not like what the British used during World War II, which made it actually really, really pleasant to shoot. I took this to the range, and it was fun to shoot, quick shoot, and do some of the other things that you can do with a light charged round. So it's actually would be probably really good to teach a new person to shooting, or maybe a young person, how to shoot, because it would be, more powerful than a 22, with maybe not as unpleasant of a trigger as a 22 can be, but not so much recoil that it makes it really unpleasant for a new shooter. As you can see, I did not shoot, as with most revolvers, I did not shoot particularly great. That's at 10 yards with single action. I should have done much, much better than that. My double action wasn't nearly as good. So you can just see that the bucket is not super awesome with revolvers, but I really enjoyed it. And for the cost of the gun, it's a great way to have maybe a U.S. property marked firearm, another World War II firearm. You can see these right around. When I went on Guns International and Gun Broker, I saw some of these selling for that 400 all the way up to 800 mark, dependent on the condition. The 38 Smith & Wesson ones are a little bit less expensive than the 38 Special ones. But you have to remember, these guns, about 3 or 4 years ago, Model 10s that were prison trade-ins, were selling for $200, $250. I can't find those that cheap anymore, but these particular guns, because of the World War II history, are going to run a little bit more expensive, but can still be had at a really, really reasonable price. And the great thing is things like speed loaders. Because the Model 10 is so popular, speed loaders will work just fine with this particular gun. They're inexpensive to get as well. It's just a really easy battery of arms to work with. They're a great firearm. If you could pick one up and you want another piece of World War II history for your collection, by all means, this would be an awesome option for you. I want to thank you guys so much for supporting the channel, for checking out what I have to say. All the likes, the shares, the comments are really appreciated. And as always, you stay classy, YouTube. Little baby bucket, do you want to live in California?
No.
Why?
Because I'm not a compliment.